we may as well make a start. So welcome to the Education Committee meeting of Thursday the 17th of March 2016. I remind members that this meeting will be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. So if we move on to the agenda, item 1, Sederunt and apologies. Lucy?
Good morning. We have 19 members present today. We are quorate, and I have apologies from Councillor McClung, Councillor Nicholl, Robert McQuiston, Reverend William McFadden, and George Jameson, and also Councillor Karen Crothers. Not present are Councillor McGregor and Councillor Wiper. They may be along later in the meeting.
Thanks, Lucy. Declarations of interest, do we have any? No. Okay, so we move to item 3, the minute of the meeting of 21st of January 2016. Yeah. So can we agree the minute? Yeah. And Colin, you want to make an update?
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief update on a matter arising. At that committee, as you know, we took forward the proposals and look at the statutory consultation around Langlands, Elmbank, and indeed North West Dumfries. And it's just to inform members that the government have decided not to call in any of those consultations. So we're coming back to you on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. So item 4, this is the property building schools asset class update. So this provides an update on the early years investment and the current financial commitment across financial years 2014-15, 2016-17. And it also reports a reason for the variance of the works at Lang all through school. So we have Lauren Foss and Claire Renton to speak to this. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add to the report at this point. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll throw it open to discussion, members. Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points to make. The first one is regarding bullet point 3.1, where it says the early years nursery environment continues positive progress with the implementation of investment plans, etc. My question is whether these plans are involving our private partnership providers as well. The ethos of the Children and Young People's Act of 2014 specifically requested flexibility, and to deliver flexibility we cannot ignore our partnership providers, particularly in a rural area such as this. So that is my first question. I don't know if you want me to pause, and before the Chairman might be kind enough to let me in with the second point.
Chair, I'm happy to pick that one up. This report is very specifically about investment in the asset class, and the funding that the Scottish Government gave was set aside for investment in relation to 2-year-olds and in relation to local authority providers. On the wider question about involvement with all of our partner providers in delivering provision in the future, I'm aware that a number of concerns have been raised through a letter to the Chair. And we've asked it wouldn't be fair to discuss that in here because the early years team isn't here today, but I've asked the early years team to give a very, very detailed response to those concerns, and that response will be with the Chair within the next couple of days and can be shared with members forthwith.
Alistair?
In that case, can we look forward to a report in the near future regarding the overarching plan for the entire delivery, both within the authority nurseries and the private nurseries?
If members are so minded, I think we would be happy to bring forward a report in due course, yes.
Thank you. Can I crave your indulgence for my second point?
Ron, do you want to be back in on that, or is it?
No, I just think the type of language that's being used about ignoring isn't conducive to partnership work, and we as a council do rely on private providers, and we do understand the difficulties they have. And I find it quite rich actually when Nicola Sturgeon came out and says, you know, she doesn't want private nursery provision provided by private providers, she wants it all in-house to councils. So I think it's a bit rich when, you know, somebody from the SNP is actually coming with that kind of statement.
Alistair?
I've no knowledge of the First Minister saying that. I thought it was in contrary, but I'm not going to engage in a political debate here. Can I move on to my second point? I'm looking at 3.3, where it says that the total capital expenditure exceeds the allocation of 1.939 million by 103,000, with the shortfall being made up by a one-off contribution from early years revenue funding. I find that rather strange in view of the fact that at the Policy and Resources Committee meeting of the 14th of January, the sum of 797,000 was unspent monies from Scottish Government, which was put into our change fund. So could somebody explain to me why we are buttressing the amount because of a shortfall, as indicated in paragraph 3.3, whereas at the same time a couple of months ago we had unspent money from Scottish Government that we put into the change fund?
Claire?
Thanks for your query. We weren't part of the policy and resource paper, so if you can give us time to go back and have a look at that, quite happy to report to members after the meeting.
Thank you. It's item 5 in the Policy and Resources Committee meeting.
Ronnie?
Just on that, seeing the policy resources have been brought up, the early years funding that we did get from the Scottish Government, we actually had been spending it from the council money at the start. So it wasn't a underspend as such. It was money that was left that we'd already put in from the council before that. So this, again, you know, I would have hoped that the SNP would have came to the Education Committee to talk about education, not trying to score political points. I know there's an election coming up, but if we're trying to do education here in a local level and try to get over, please try and go over the SNP elections.
Chairman, that's ridiculous. I want that withdrawn. There was absolutely nothing in Mr. Witts' comments that had anything to do with the way that's been characterised by the leader. He ought to know better.
You know, there's an awful lot of politics creeping into this from both within the council and outside the council. And I think we do need to have a fully informed paper coming forward, okay? And the letter which will be circulated in response to the letter from Ms. McAlpine, okay? Okay, Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll change the tone totally and talk about the variance regarding Langham and just say I think both the Education Department and the Education Committee can take a massive slap on the back here, because what we've created in Langham is fantastic. The public love it, the kids love it, and even the community using the new 3G pitch think it's fantastic. So we really have done a wonderful job. I know it's slightly overspent, but this project started 10, 11, maybe 12 years ago and had its pitfalls and its highs, and the fact that we ended up where we've ended up with what we've ended up, I say is good news, and I think everybody can take a slap on the back because it's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I was at Langham for the opening of the primary school, and I was really impressed by the way in which the three parts have been integrated so well and are working together. And I think, you know, it could be an example of best practice, really, in terms of integration. Dick?
Yeah, scrutiny of Langham all through school. I suppose if we've scrutinised it, we should ask the question again, is the £558,000, £315 for the dining room, is it good? How do we know it's the best value?
Larry?
I suppose going back, looking at the historic arrangements across at the location, the historic dining facilities were across in the primary school, so creating an all-through campus needed to have a dining facility built into that, and part of the process was a scoping exercise to look at what delivers value for money, where's the best location for that. If you know the facility from the olden days, the derelict or unused changing facilities that were lying empty proved to be the prime location in the heart of the school, which gave a feed in from the primary side and a feed in from the secondary. But I think maybe what's key in this is a post-occupancy evaluation of how it's delivering, how it's working operationally, as well as looking at facts and figures behind that to support it might be of value moving forward.
Dennis?
Yeah, just to add to that, Chair, best value for me is also safety. And if the children had carried on using the old dining room, they would have had to cross the road every time they went to it, a busy road with timber traffic on it. So this really is best value, and it's added to a wonderful facility.
No more speakers. Can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1 and 2.2, the variance regarding the Langham all-through school is detailed at 3.4 to 3.7. Okay. Thank you. So if we move to item 5, and this is the Director's 6 monthly assessment of the business plan performance for education services, 2015-2016. Director, is there anything you want to add today? No. Gillian?
No, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. It's a very positive report. I think I'll draw your attention to the graph on page 13, which I think shows an increasing percentage of leavers in terms of looked after children and improving overall attainment levels, which I think for me is one of the most important features. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Student members? Right, can we agree? Oh. Dick?
Yeah. Each year we ask about the performance reviews for educational staff, and each year we fall short of what's really desirable or what we should be offering our staff. So, and it says again we're taking steps to meet these targets, but can we assure that next year we won't be seeing this, that we're taking steps and that we've actually achieved professional views for most of our staff?
Julie?
Thank you. I'm aware that this does sound like a bit of retrospective rationale. I'm absolutely confident that our teachers are having their annual professional review, but I'm also aware that the system expects that if you move post within the year, they expect you to have a new professional review. Now, in terms of teachers' professional update, whether you are teaching at Langham Primary or Canonbury Primary, you are entitled to 1 review per year, but the system expects you to have 2. So the GTC expects you to have 1, and the system expects you to have a review within the year if you move post. And we're finding it very difficult to analyse. What we're going to do is go out to all schools and go through the bureaucratic exercise of asking all 2,700 staff to fill in a spreadsheet. That's the only way we can get this. Personally, I'm finding it quite difficult, and I know it's frustrating to members.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. It was about the PDRs and it's about the non-teaching staff. I'm back at it again. I'm really not very sure how this comes about, because it's a different set of standards, a different type of PDR from the teaching staff. I understand that, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that the two officers can actually give us, or the director can give us an indication as to why there's a problem doing this with the and meeting the targets for the non-teaching staff, who, given the roles, didn't change that much. I've got another question if you'd let me back in later, Chair. Thank you. Julie?
Thank you. This is a figure overall for our overall workforce. It's a percentage of the overall workforce. It also includes supply teachers, includes casual staff. So there are a number of flaws, if you like, in the way this is calculated. And the only way I would feel confident in getting an accurate number is to go out with spreadsheets to all staff. I'm not happy about doing that on a monthly basis, which is what the KPI expects, but at least for June we will have an absolutely confident value. But yes, you're right, that although there are a different set of paperwork for non-teaching staff, those staff are included within that percentage.
Colin?
I suppose I would just add that I suppose what Gillian is saying is that we're pretty confident that the actual percentage of staff who are receiving PRDs is above what's there. Nonetheless, that's not good enough. We want to report more accurately. It is most at the moment, but we want it to be nearly all, as far as we possibly can achieve that. What I would say is we've never been inundated by people writing to complain that they're not being offered PDRs. So again, we use some proxy measures to get the feeling there isn't actually a problem. It's the recording of the data that's important. And Councillor Ferguson, when you've asked about non-teaching staff, I think part of the SL review was again about professional development for non-teaching staff in terms of classroom assistants, ASL assistants, and the generation of more senior posts that can oversee and coordinate some of the staff development opportunities there should also bring about an improvement.
Second point, Andy.
Thanks very much, Chair. On page 17, the bottom one, it's a new indicator. I appreciate that, but I'm actually wondering if there's a way we can get some sort of update on the involvement and uptake, and if we're using a proactive approach or whether we're being reactive, people coming to us, or are we as an education authority or landlords of the buildings actually saying that this building is available for other use?
I think we're getting better, and I think it's perhaps not absolutely consistent, but it's certainly improving. Members had a paper at the last committee talking about the overall use of the estate, and it is increasing, and it is now breaking even in terms of cost. And we certainly have an increasing uptake in our PPP schools, but there's work to do.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to query the definition of LAC on the graph on page 13. I see that it refers to looked after children. I presume that is children in care and one thing or another, but I think the definition is rather misleading because, I mean, an awful lot of children in families and everything that are well looked after are also looked after. Just like a comment.
This is both looked after at home and away from home. I've just checked with my colleague Gwyneth here. So we would normally differentiate between the children who are looked after at home, who are actually monitored, and children who are looked after away from home, but they still have looked after status. This graph includes both of those groups.
Yeah, just my point is that it seems a funny term, and I mean there are an awful lot of children that are looked after, you know, that aren't in those two categories.
It's a term that's used across the country for specific categories of children and nationally recognised.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Pages 22 and 23. I'm very encouraged to note that on some of the measures for reading, children in the 20% most deprived data zones are actually doing marginally better than the target. Would you care to comment on this?
I think it's a very interesting finding, and I think there are some specific schools that have got very rigorous numeracy and literacy programmes. What we are looking at, and through Gwyneth's work with the Curriculum and School Improvement team, is looking at those schools, what are they doing, and how we can replicate that across all schools. They recognise the importance of literacy and numeracy, and particularly for youngsters who are in deprived areas who may not be having that support at home, and the work is paying off.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, we've got the problem which you raised before in terms of rural areas about the SIMD index as a means of identifying people from deprived areas. So possibly it's something which Gwyneth's also looking at in terms of how you define someone from a deprived area. Okay. Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm almost hesitant about returning to early learning and childcare, but I'll try not to make the leader any more irate than he already is. It's actually page 16, PC21, I'll leave that aside. The free entitlement, the uptake of free entitlement of 600 hours to preschool children aged 2. We've got the value of 51.72%, the target of 70%. But then in the narrative, we're talking about 110 eligible families that can now access the provision, of which 90 have taken up a place, which would have us running at about 80%, and therefore doing much better than the targets are showing, which would clearly be excellent. So effectively, I was just wondering where we were with that and which one was right, because obviously if we're at 80%, then at some point we need to, maybe give ourselves a mild pat in the back and update the targets to reflect.
Gwyn?
I'll try and answer that the best I can. It's the first year of initiative by Scottish Government, and the pupil numbers have been identified by them. So the base number have been identified for them. So it's what was the number, 50% of that base number. But what it's talking about in narrative is locally we've identified 110 families, and of those 110 families that we're able to locate and notify, 90 of those families have uptaken this offer. So it's sort of two different things. The narrative is talking about the sort of business as usual side of things, and the actual figures are talking about the Scottish Government identified figures that we've got to measure against this year. Yeah, I don't quite get it either, but it's the best I can do at the minute.
Estimates, isn't it? So that I can see that the number eligible is based on Scottish Government estimates, but we are working on our estimates. So I think the Scottish Government themselves recognise perhaps that the target was quite high. We know that we're doing well, but the reality and the estimate of who was eligible is different.
The bottom line is we're doing better than we were originally estimated that we should have done.
I think, if I could add to that, yeah, that's true. We've got one of the higher rates in Scotland at 51%, and perhaps our initial target was on the high side for the first year of implementation. What I think Gwyneth's saying is that the eligibility criteria, the estimates from the government were a bit higher in terms of families from we had. I thought it was maybe to do with twins or something, but obviously, no, that was a flippant remark. Could also maybe just, since we're on that area, could you look ahead perhaps to page 17, where a comma makes a huge difference? I don't know if anybody picked that up. On page 17, in the second box down, on a percentage of preschool centres receiving positive inspections, it should actually read, there's only been one inspection in the reporting period, comma, which was positive. Which makes quite a big difference to the sentiment of that sentence and worth being aware of, I think. Thanks.
Just in terms of uptake of the early learners and childcare, I was at a meeting of the COSLA Education, Children and Young People's executive, it was a week before last, and what was stressed there was the move to 1,140 hours is going to be very, very challenging right across the country, both in terms of actually identifying the physical space and also the staff involved in rolling this out at such a large pace. So it's something which is well worth looking into. Okay, I've got no one else indicating the wish to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? And we've reviewed the 2.1, we've reviewed the 6-month performance for education services, and the 2.2, the overall summary performance. I think we've scrutinised the 2.3, the exception report in appendices 2 and 3, and can we agree 2.4, the request to extend the scope of one project as set out in appendix 4. Okay, thank you, members. We can move on to item 6, which is the primary school capacity update. Once again, these are one of these things where we could actually enter into everybody picking up their own local schools and asking questions in committee, which is something which we don't want to do. So if people have got queries about individual schools, can they raise them with the officers outside the meeting? What we want is general questions, which append to all of these. So we've got Claire and Lauren to speak to these. Again, Claire?
No further comment to make to the paper, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Robert?
Thanks, Chair. I had a communication from one of my colleagues at Hecklegurth primary school. It seems that they are saying that the classroom numbers at Hecklegirth are wrong, and therefore the revised capacity is wrong. Could you tell me whether that's true, and is it the possibility that there are other figures that are incorrect as well?
Okay.
Hi, I'm aware of the query in Hecklegirth and responded that the figures are not wrong and the classrooms are not wrong. The point that I stressed in terms of the email correspondent was about the Scottish Government guidance about the use of GP spaces and moving from GP spaces. So with Hecklegirth, there's 14 classrooms, so they're entitled to do general purpose spaces, which have been given under the revised arrangement. I have done a full and frank email, and I would also say that I've also had dialogue with the head teacher and the parent council chair, and both of them had understood and agreed to the revised capacity. So hopefully we put that one to bed.
Thank you for that. 14 classrooms with 404 pupils.
So what I would
I'm looking at the table on page 47. It says classrooms, there are 14 at Hecklegirth. The roll at the minute is 227, the capacity is 284, and it's shot up to 404 pupils.
That's because Hecklegirth is a very large school and it has a very large amount of space. So when you look at the general purpose spaces that Hecklegirth has, and I am going into detail here, which I think we'd sort of clarified at the start we wouldn't do, is that they have a hugely significant more general purpose spaces than most other schools across the region. And what we're saying, and what I would stress as well, we're talking about the potential maximum physical or functional capacity. We acknowledge that catchment demand, which is not there for 404 places at Hecklegirth, staffing complement, but also the pupil cohort in terms of class makeup would have an influence in there. So all I'm really stressing is this is the potential theoretical functional capacity that school could take, and it does have a lot of space in it.
I think, as Claire indicated, if you want to discuss this further, then probably better to raise it with outside this meeting. But we do have some schools which have got a very low roll compared to what the design capacity was. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Just two things through you. 3.3.2. My O-level maths or O-level arithmetic from the 1960s actually said rounding went down, not up, if it was below 49.5. Just wondering why we've gone up to 50 there. No doubt Claire will have an answer for that. The second thing here is you see all the capacities. Do these include the nursery provision in those primary schools that have got attached nurseries, or are they separate?
No, it's purely focused on primary capacity. Nursery capacity is a separate item and requires separate calculations. In terms of the rounding up, what we're trying to do is make some sensible decisions here, because we have schools of various design and we have quite challenging situations where we've got 49.03 metres squared in a school, and that extra child is not allowed in a school currently because the capacity does not allow that. So if it was 49.03, you would have to go back down to the nearest item, which would be 48, to allow 24 children in. We're saying let's be sensible here for the sake of a very small piece of space that we could probably find from somewhere, take it up to the 50, then you allow another child in, and that's particularly around supporting catchment children getting into local primary schools.
Alistair?
Thank you. I wanted to know, if you look at the table, you can see that the number of GP areas varies from 0 in one case to 4. What is the definition of, what is the definition of GP room, and is there a ratio between the capacity and, or the potential capacity and the availability of GP space?
So yes, I can certainly recirculate the November committee, which details the government guidance, and that's always very good bedtime reading of all the detail. So general purpose space is regarded, and there is a general sort of terminology about it, as an additional space where you can perform another function with the class within that. There is guidance in terms of up to 8 classrooms should have 1 general purpose space, up to 14 should have 2 purpose spaces, and so on. So the government guidance, I think, is quite clear in terms of giving us a parameter to work within, and we certainly followed that following committee's decision to adopt that guidance in November.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Did the Scottish Government upgrade the per capita space allowance in light of the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, which after all assumes a more active form of learning?
I think the question is, I'm not sure if I can specifically say that. We've certainly had the updated guidance note, which one would believe has been updated to reflect the new form of teaching. We have not seen anything in the guidance which we believe wouldn't support Curriculum for Excellence, but I don't think I've seen a specific statement which actually says that.
So you're not aware of any increased allowance for pupils?
I would say no, and I would say from our work with the Scottish Futures Trust, there's certainly a challenge with government to be much more innovative and creative about how you use your space to provide a wider breadth of opportunity to support Curriculum for Excellence.
It certainly strikes me as strange that they did not increase the space allowance per pupil. I find that illogical.
It's always the cost implications in that, I would imagine.
I suppose it's not an exact science, and one might argue in terms of Curriculum for Excellence, if you're moving away from the more traditional sitting in 30 desks in single rows, that might need less space for people to move about and actually be more active. So I don't think that side of it is an exact science in terms of the guidance that we're given.
Dick?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question about how the exercise was carried out. It says that all the floor plans were examined. Was it a desktop exercise, or was it physically checked at all the schools? And has the information been shared already with all the schools that you've got?
So initially a team of officers got together to review all the desktop plans, and bearing in mind those officers have detailed knowledge of the schools on a regular basis. We did that exercise twice to do a double check on it. We have issued plans to every head teacher, asking them to share them with the parent council. We've probably got about 30 to 40% return yet, and we're still chasing them back to come and speak to us and mark up plans. We have done some sample sets, so I went out to some of the Stranraer schools and I went out to the Mackers cluster just to test the approach and also the feedback, and that was concurrent with what we're thinking. So in an ideal world, you'd have a team of people to go out to every 120 schools, but that's not feasible. What we want to do is get an updated set of information, update the capacities, and then, as I've detailed in the paper, on a yearly basis, we get a return in to make sure we keep on top of this item and any changes the schools might need.
Ian?
Thanks, Jim. When I was reading this report, and you go back to the page 49, and it indicates here that we've got, now with this revision, we've got 15,381 of a capacity across our primary schools and 10,779 actual pupils there. That's about 65-66%. It looks like we're looking at. I mean, I just wondered, is this going to force or even encourage whatever language you want to use in regards to looking at a potential rationalisation of primary schools across Dumfries and Galloway? Or what does this mean in real terms? I felt as if that question should be asked when I read this. I think it's legitimate, Chairman.
I think that's a good question, and what I would say is that the final paper that we're going to look at today looks at underutilisation, and that's not necessarily about rationalising in terms of closing schools, but it does raise the very questions that you've just asked, Councillor. So maybe that last paper might be the opportunity to discuss this. Also, I think maybe just a note for members around the changing capacity definitions and around the revised capacities. It's interesting sometimes the contact you might get from staff or from your constituents around any questions of changing capacity. In most cases, schools are pleased to see that the capacity has increased. It's normally the case where it's decreased, and schools are a bit worried about kids not being able to come to their school, that you'll get concerns. But equally, as we've heard today from Robert, there can be occasions where the school increases its capacity, and there might be individuals or some people who feel that that looks a bit tight if you were to have all of the kids there. But by and large, with an increased capacity definition for most of the schools, it's unlikely to lead to complaints to you because there'll be more opportunities for kids to go to those schools.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman, for letting me back in. No, happy to pick that up on the right of me. I think it's correct. I did pick up there as well. I linked the two together anyways, and I should have mentioned, I was going to mention, I think there is a positive in regards to parental choice when it comes to where their kids can go. I think that'll be a positive as we go forward.
I've got no more members, so can we move to the recommendations? Okay, who's happy with that? So, moving to item 7. St. Peter's Roman Catholic Primary School, Dalbeattie, statutory consultation, confirmation of closure. Claire, is there anything?
Nothing further to add.
Okay. Happy to agree. And just to say, I think this has been a very good exercise in terms of getting it right. Because obviously, if we get any of these school closures wrong, then we have to go 5 years before we can review it again. So it is very important that we do go through the correct procedures. It's been a very good exercise to go through. Okay, so moving to item 8, which is effectively, I suppose, the follow-up paper to item 6, the review of guidance in relation to low utilisation schools. And this is to provide members an update on the rural school provision policy due to change in legislation as a result of the Statutory Consultation Act and the Children and Young People's Bill 2014. So it's Claire and Lauren again. Is there anything you want to add?
Nothing I want to add to the paper.
Members?
Thank you, Chair. A very interesting report, I have to say, and one that I think might set some hairs running if we're not careful and we don't manage it well through communication. And I really would just like an assurance that the information that goes out to the public and to the schools very much emphasises that this is not a paper about school closures. And on top of that, it might be an idea to actually give out the information of what a school closure process looks like, because Claire is very aware in the past, we've all had phone calls where the hairs have started to run. But once you explain that the very extensive process and communication with communities before you even reach a stage of requesting a closure is very in-depth, I think that might help to stop folk from panicking. Because as I say, I think it's a very positive report in that we need to know this data, we need to know what to do with our schools, but it's not a presumption of closure of any of our schools, and that has to be emphasised most strongly.
I'm sure we can do that and make people aware that this is part of the process. Yeah. I mean, this also ties in with community schools as well, because if we've got these buildings and we're only using maybe 20%, 30% of them, then, you know, it does leave a lot of spare capacity. And one example is a village school, which has got a very low role at the moment. And I know, given the closure of other facilities, including the pub up in A, which has been used for meetings from other groups, it actually does free up space within the school itself to be used by other organisations. So it is a very positive paper, although obviously there could be misinterpreted. Okay. Ian?
No, thanks, Chairman. I suppose it refers to the timeline being into 2017. I think that's the correct approach. Do this nice and gently, steady and carefully, and taking into consideration the points that Gail's already raised. I think it is important that we do take that approach and make sure this isn't about going out and look at the 50% and it's a fait accompli. It's about taking a measured approach, and I think the council, we're quite clear on that, so happy with the recommendations, Chairman.
Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. When the Rural School Provision Group sit down to consider how to use the spare capacity in the rural schools, I would myself like some consideration be given to the use of part of these schools as preschool nurseries, because I feel that part of what pulls people away from using the rural schools in their area is often parents' work patterns, and I feel that if we, in a sense, buttressed the attraction of schools by having nursery provision there, that would be a worthy ambition, because it also ticks the box about trying to develop or sustain rural communities. Thank you.
And that's a good point. Where do we go on the back of this in terms of utilising this spare capacity? And I know it's not just an education issue, it obviously goes right across the council.
So what we'll do following a decision made by committee today, and if it supports the recommendations, is we will compile a spreadsheet of the lowest utilisation schools within the 50%. We'll be doing our homework across the council in terms of further numbers, projections, what's happening elsewhere. We also look at the various initiatives that government and the council are promoting in terms of family centres, extension of early years provision, maybe consolidation of any other facilities, libraries, etc. The other thing that we've done recently is we've obviously made representation to the housing demand needs study in terms of indicating that if there was any possibility of attracting affordable homes to these areas to support these communities, that would be beneficial as well. So there's a lot of different work streams that have to happen, as well as conversations with the key users in a positive and engaged manner.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually picking up on a really good point you yourself made earlier about A, and I'm wondering here if there's a capacity, or if we're currently talking to the locality managers in the integration process. There's, I would suggest, in remote rural schools, a real opportunity to further utilise the schools and actually bring the two things together. I appreciate we haven't integrated children, it's adult health social care, but if the facility's there and it's open and it's, I'm thinking maybe, for example, the school kitchen, alternative use, and then get the people in doing other things. So I'm just wondering if there's been any work on that, or if there's a plan to actually to work with the locality managers and integration.
Okay.
There's been selected discussions in selected areas that have identified a need so far, but certainly we find that relationship conversation very good. We've also spoken about area managers as well, about wider ASL provisions. So there's lots of conversations. We're aware with DG First in terms of production kitchens, what they serve the wider community. So again, we'll just keep expanding in that conversation.
Just two questions. I would hope there'd be some threshold considered if, for example, a primary school had 500 pupils and it was less than 50%. The very idea of shifting them about to other schools would be, to say the least, challenging. And it's really the other element that's no featured in this document, I think, when we're talking about considering the viability of a school. Should we be considering closing a school, it then involves transportation. There's routes management. We've had fatalities with school children on the 76. Some of the roads in this region are dangerous, to say the least, and that's no featured here as part of the consideration. Housing is, so should transportation, if we're considering moving any number of school children around different parts of the region.
Claire?
So in terms of the point you're making on transport, that's heavily included in the 2010 and 2014 Acts. We have to model about transport routes, carbon emissions, etc., as an impact of any potential closure that may happen. In terms of your first point about the modelling and impact of a larger school environment, I don't think we're in that situation. We've got larger school environments whereby low occupancy, but certainly the process is thorough in terms of understanding all the implications in terms of the community, other facilities, other developments, displacement, because, even on the small schools that we've been successful in moving to closure already, we've had to do an analysis to say, right, okay, well, where those children could likely to be displaced to, and what's the consequential impact on their environments as well. So there's a lot of discussions behind the scenes which may or may not be reported, but we're just trying to be condensed and focused on the reports that we give you.
Jim?
And I suppose lastly, and I know you will be, but just to rehearse this, should be considering other sections of council service provision as a way of updating or ensuring the capacity is right for maintaining schools in their current location, and in that way better utilising them, but no impact on the children and the wider community.
With your indulgence, Chair, thank you. Just one very brief point, page 61. Number 5, bullet point, second from the bottom, elected member for area. I assume that should read elected members for area, given we have the multi-member ward system now. Or is it an elected member who sits on education? Just clarification on that one tiny little point.
Could you repeat point?
Sorry, number 5 on page 61, part of the Rural School Provision Group. The composition of that group, it says elected member for area. That should probably read elected members for area.
So we've not updated that guidance, it's from old, but
Oh, is it?
generally
Right.
the approach we take is to engage with all the ward members, so how many are interested in that ward, because you can't really isolate one.
Andy?
Same point, Chair. The community planning representation, is that somebody from Mr. Crichton's department, or is that from the community planning partnership? Because that's an external body. It's a joint body.
Okay.
So planning in our definition would be the planning and social housing colleagues. So we work with the planners in terms of informing things like the local development plan, reviewing any likely developments. But we also work with community colleagues as well to understand what are the wider interests. So I would imagine it would be somebody from Derek Crichton's team.
Okay, can we move to the recommendation? Oh, sorry.
All right, thank you, Chair. Just wanted a clarification on something here. I noticed that the RC schools, most of them, in fact all of them, are dropping dramatically, 74% down to 7, 55 to 12, 48 to 11, 24 to 7. Is there are these low capacity schools anyway, and is that just reflecting the figures, or why such a dramatic decrease over 4 or 5 years?
The fundamental challenge we have with RC schools is around their catchment technically is only children who are baptised Roman Catholic. So that's what we've had to project in the figures. So I think you're right in picking that up because it doesn't look right. What we can't project is any catchment children who might want to go there. So it looks like they are on a downward trajectory, but we know parents choose to have their children attend Catholic schools and we regard it as extraterritorial placements. So please don't read that as a demise of the Catholic school provision. It's just we can only record the information that we have.
Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Oh. Ted?
So an observation, just on Appendix 2, it said that all these areas are highlighted. There's a massive shades of different greys there, perhaps for a future report, we could have something that's a little bit more readable.
I have to say that in the draft, this was in colour. The colour seems to, I think it must be cutbacks in the council budget.
I think, Chair, if it would be helpful to members, we'll send this out to you in colour, if that helps you, because it is easier to read that way. Yep.
Okay, can we move to recommendations? Can we agree 2.1? 2.2 seems to have disappeared. So I take it that 2.3 is now 2.2. That we agree 2.3 is 2.2, 2.4 is 2.3, and 2.5 is 2.4. Yep. Okay, members? Okay, I've got no further business, so thanks for your attendance.